This is part 2 in the DSMB series, Advanced DSMB Deployment Techniques. This is Chris with Dive Zone Scuba for another technical diving tips, techniques, and trips video. In part 1 of this series, we discussed applications and selection of DSMBs for technical scuba diving. In this video, part 2, we'll be talking about advanced DSMB deployment techniques. However, before we begin discussing advanced deployment techniques, we're going to begin with a review of standard deployment techniques. There are many videos on the internet that discuss this subject. So the following video is just one of many different methods that can be used to successfully deploy a DSMB. The strange regulator rig setup that I'm using in this video clip is actually an independent double setup with standard right-hand K-valves. In order to utilize this technique, the left-hand tank must be rotated 180 degrees from its normal position. This allows the diver to have access to both valve handles as would be normal with modular valves. This enables the diver to perform various valve shutdowns as necessary in the event of an emergency. I did dive in Bonaire at the beginning of 2022 using this setup for a week, and I did not encounter any difficulties whatsoever. I conducted up to 5 dives a day by simply switching out both tanks at the local Dive Friends location. The first step in the standard deployment of the DSMB is to remove the double ender snap and to put it on a D-ring so it's out of the way initially. And then the second step is to remove the retaining bungees from the DSMB. Note how there are 2 retaining bungees, one on each side. 2 is one, 1 is none. While neutrally buoyant, I'm going to remove my regulator with my right hand and inflate the DSMB and finger spool in my left hand. After looking up, I will release the finger spool and allow the DSMB to travel to the surface. The last step is to prevent the finger spool from unspooling using the original double ender. For advanced DSMB deployment techniques, we'll be discussing the following topics. There are relatively few videos on the internet on these subjects. In this situation, the diver will use a second DSMB and attach it to the original DSMB finger spool line using some sort of snap, such as a double ender. The failed DSMB situation can occur when the diver fails to provide adequate inflation to the bladder, or the bladder experiences a problem such as a rupture or a spill. Another advanced DSMB deployment technique is high volume inflation. This is utilized when more than one breath is required to inflate the DSMB. This might occur in shallower water where there is insufficient depth for the volume of air in the DSMB to fully expand. There are at least two techniques to achieve this. The first is to swim down against the increased buoyancy, and the second is to deflate the wing to maintain the same buoyancy. The following video clip will demonstrate technique number 2. The high volume inflation deployment technique starts out in a similar fashion as the standard inflation deployment technique. After inflating the DSMB the first time, it is not released. What the diver does is they adjust the buoyancy if necessary. The process is then repeated several times until a sufficient volume of gas is inside the DSMB. The diver does not compensate for the increased buoyancy of the partially inflated DSMB by releasing gas from their wing. The diver may lose buoyancy control and begin to rise. Toward the end of this sequence, the DSMB can be significantly positively buoyant, and the diver can be significantly negatively buoyant. When the diver finally releases the DSMB, it is important that the diver maintains some tension on the finger spool. This will prevent the diver from inadvertently descending due to increased negative buoyancy. The diver can then add gas to the wing to re-achieve neutral buoyancy. A third advanced DSMB deployment technique is the fixed position ascent. This technique is used when the diver does not want to be carried off in the current relative to a fixed position. In order to use this technique, the diver must first deploy the DSMB. The fixed position ascent requires a fully inflated DSMB in order to hold the position. The first step in this technique is to identify a fixed point to which a bolt snap can be attached to. In this case, I'm going to attach the bolt snap to a piece of line that is fixed to the bottom. I'm then going to take the previously deployed DSMB and run the finger spool line through the other end of the double ender. This provides a low friction means of controlling the DSMB and later recovering it. At this point, the diver can begin the ascent. It is important to maintain tension on the finger spool so the diver does not get taken away with the current. I'm now ascending to the surface using the finger spool to control my ascent. In this video clip, I am periodically locking the reel with my fingers to simulate a deco stop. Since the finger spool line is being fed through the double ender, which is fixed on the bottom, the current cannot carry off the diver. I have been forced to use this technique on a wreck when I was unable to reach the ascent point. In that case, this technique prevented me from having to do a drift deco. Once on the surface, the finger spool line can be recovered by detaching it from the DSMB and running it through the double ender bolt snap on the bottom. However, the double ender will be sacrificed temporarily until it can be recovered on a future dive. As the video will show here in a second, the DSMB is highly inflated. This is required to make this technique work properly. If the DSMB is not highly inflated, the DSMB will be pulled down underneath the surface. The diver then may be unable to recover the finger spool line. This is Chris with Dive Zone Scuba. Thanks for watching. I hope the video was helpful.